Thank you, Frank. We have no announcements today, so we're going to get right into the first discussion item, which relates to the proposed changes to Chapter 301 for site plan fees, DC1 zoning, small lot ordinance, and the pattern book. There's a lot packed into this, and I want to thank the folks from the Code Revision Committee for their good work in bringing these topics forward for discussion today. And I'm going to ask Eric and Jeff to come forward and
Also
and
Emery.
and I believe Dawn Thomas also
Yeah.
regarding this discussion.
And Emery.
Anne Marie, yes.
So which items would you like to, any preference of which ones you'd like to do first?
Well, the code revision, the chapter 301,
Okay, so we're going to do
Zoning.
the pattern book first?
yep.
Okay. Henry, you could have sat next to me, I don't know.
Well, I,
Good morning,
gotcha.
Grand Marshal.
Oh, thank you. Yes,
Oh, thank you.
it was a good day.
So to get, I'll just lead off just briefly, if Anne Marie doesn't mind. This is a joint effort between community development, the town attorney's office, and the planning department. And this began back in 2019 when we hired Urban Design Associates with Barry Long. And we worked with the Downtown Revitalization Committee on this. And in January of last year, we actually adopted the pattern book. And that's the kind of like the master plan that set forth the parameters for new development in the downtown area, and everybody really embraced it, and Barry Long did a phenomenal job with it. The steps after that, we had to do the SECRA on that. We did that last year, and then really, with the amount of volume of work coming into the town, new developments, we really wanted to adopt the recommendations of the pattern book into a local law, and that's what we're doing today. We're scheduling the public, if you concur, we want to schedule this for a public hearing. So, Emery, I don't know if you want to start off, or?
Well, it's very extensive, the amendments. I know, that it's in minute tracks. I have hard copies if you want to go through it, but I anticipate that all the members on the town board are going to want to take a day or two to actually go through it, because it's a lot of amendments. And basically, the most significant portion of it is the recommendation of the pattern book to reduce the height to 4 stories and,
50 feet.
yeah, and to, quote, wedding cake design. Jeff coined that phrase early on, where with each story you have certain setbacks, to reduce the visual impact and the shadow effect of even a 4-story building. That's the most significant. I think the town board would be very comfortable with the other aspects that are related to the design and materials.
Just to elaborate on what Emery's saying is, some other things that are recommended in the comprehensive, in the pattern book, is to reduce the floor area ratio. Right now, it's a 4.0 floor area ratio, which is a very intensive building mass, and I think we now see what that looks like with existing buildings in the downtown. The recommendation of the pattern book is to reduce that to 3.5, so you're going to see reduced scale and mass of buildings. This came from the Architectural Review Board, and landmarks is actually to have buildings step backs, as Emery talked about, but it's sort of like a pyramid effect, so that you have a 45-degree angle of deflection of adjacent buildings, so you don't have a very tall building next to a very short building without some sort of transition in between. So you have to have that 45-degree angle, so to speak, so that it transitions from the taller building to the lower building, which will help soften the effect of that building. Other recommendations, just very briefly, the code requires that there be energy standards incorporated with the project design, trying to achieve a zero net energy goal. This is the town's really first form-based code. We actually have illustrations to show what the new code would require. So there can be no ambiguity as what the purpose and intent is. So that's exciting. You're actually going to start seeing illustrations in our zoning code to show what kind of development that we are trying to encourage. We're trying to encourage active storefronts along Main Street, so you just don't have a blank facade, that there's public interaction with the building. There's going to be a buffering requirement between the buildings and adjacent residential development, single-family homes. And then in the last section, this is an important one, are the grandfather provisions. Which projects are currently in the pipeline are grandfathered and which ones are not. And right now, everything would be grandfathered in with the exception of the Wayne Steck former West Marine building. That one came in after with the grandfather provision.
When you say everything, Jeff, what are the ones that you are grandfathered?
That would be the Muchnick building.
Right.
The Suffolk Theater Building Addition, and the Zenith building. So those three buildings, the Zenith is on McDermott Street as well.
So I think I would just add to that, although the grandfathering provision exists, our group spent and will continue to spend, because once the plan was adopted, the board's intention was expressed through that adoption. So although it wasn't codified, we still were able to work with developers like Muchnick to make sure that there was compliance with the essential provisions of this now new, soon-to-be local law. So I think just to say that it gives us a great opportunity, and it will continue to get even better now that we're adopting the code, to have developers understand what it is that the board wants to see downtown and make sure that it happens in a way. And now we have an objective, document to the plan and the code to show them. And I would say, and I don't know if you guys agree, that it was incredibly effective in helping us work with those developers to make sure that particularly the Muchnick building, which will be the largest building in our downtown, eventually, looks like you want it to look.
And it's not a blanket grandfathering provision,
Yeah.
to be clear. It actually, so it's, those applications filed on or before January 20th, 2021, which is the adoption of the pattern book. Why did we choose that date? Well, the world was on notice. The pattern book was very public. It was a very public process. The adoption was, quote, on the record. The pattern book was then online and available to everyone. So just going a step further, when I say it's not a blanket grandfathering clause, it's only as to specific provisions, 301, 142A1, A5, and B1. However, as to 142A5 and B1, the applicant shall demonstrate reasonable efforts to comply with these provisions and achieve as reasonably practical compliance with the provisions, and all other provisions recited above shall apply in full force and effect. So it's not a blanket grandfathering, it's actually really tight and specific.
Right. There are not very many projects.
Exactly.
And this is with 100% build out,
It's permissible for 100% lot coverage.
lot coverage, that's what,
Yes.
Yeah, that I have an issue with. That's the one thing I really do not like. I like 80%. I can deal with 80%. 100% I do not care for.
I mean, if you're looking to put, commercial businesses on Main Street, let's say somebody takes a restaurant, you have 100% lot coverage. That gives them a very narrow sidewalk, so, yeah, I think that's one thing.
Well, I don't think that's.
No.
Right, so the way it works is the pattern book requires a certain width of sidewalk. So you have 100% lot coverage to the extent you can do that within the other parameters that the code gives you. So
You can't take one
the
exclusively
the
than another.
The pattern
what's
book
the net?
recommends the sidewalk be a specific width and have amenity space, walking space, and then rest area. That's not going to be, that will still
Understood.
be required in addition to, 100% is conditioned upon those
So
provisions.
what it's going to do, though, is because you're limiting the height, you're giving them the density on the sides. What does that also do? We're trying to eliminate those narrow, dark walkways. And if you are going to have any, quote, open space, or you're not building at 100%, that walkway also pursuant to the pattern book has definite parameters. No more narrow, dark corridors. If you're going to create a corridor and you're not going to build out 100% on the sides, you're going to have to go 12 feet wide, you're going to have lighting, it's going to have to actually be created as like an amenity space. Very similar to the walkway next to Haiku.
Yeah.
You know, where it's bricked and lit, and that's the goal. No more narrow, dark alleyways.
So another question I have, are we requiring cameras on all the corners, all around the buildings, on everything built downtown?
That would not be.
Not for
No.
this
Not for this code.
Why wouldn't we do, just out of curiosity, I mean,
that would be a different
That would be
provision
public
of
safety.
code, not
Okay.
out of the pattern book.
Right.
okay.
That's not a zoning issue.
So can I ask so we're looking to reduce it to 4 stories. How does that affect certain buildings, like, for example, Long Island Science Center gets built and they want to have rooftop, is that considered a 5th story, the rooftop, when it's accessible, or when somebody else builds something that has rooftop dining? We can't, you know what I mean? So we're talking about 4 completed structures, but what happens if we're developing the rooftop
It's a
itself?
50 feet in height.
50-foot height, and if they have amenities on the rooftop, that's fine. And we're encouraging that, honestly, I think.
And one of the things Jeff was talking about, the goal of zero net energy. In addition, the amendment to this code actually advances green roof design. So that rooftops have green elements, which is a benefit.
Great.
And so it's anticipated that you might have, quote, an amenity on the rooftop design, whether it's if it's an apartment, whether it's for the residents, whether it's for rooftop dining, whether it's, quote, science related to the
We know that
science
the
center.
science center wants to put an observatory. That would be totally fine.
Jeff, if the build-out is 100%, the thing and I've discussed this with you, that I really like the privately owned public spaces doctrine, if you will. Can that be incorporated in 100% build-out? That makes it more difficult, does it not?
It does.
See, that's why really I think 80% works for me. I think, because I would like to see a lot more of that with this development that's going on downtown, where there's spaces that the public can use, even though they're owned by the people who are developing or owner of the property. To me, it's more inviting. It's not just a stark building front sitting there. So that's why, one of the reasons I'm in favor of the 80%.
How's the rest of the board feel on that?
I'm in favor of less of the lot coverage, and I'm also, I don't know where we came up with the 4 stories. To me, if we go 80 for 1, for 2, I don't think we're leveraging like TDRs to go up another story, and I don't think the town, and that's 1. And I know you guys put a lot of work into this. The other thing I'm concerned about is we're looking at the population today. I'm thinking, okay, EPCAL builds out, people are going to need places to live. I'm very concerned that we have places for people to live 5 years from now, 10 years from now, without putting pressure on the farms that have development rights to sell their rights to a developer, and then we have homes sprawled out all over the place. So that's where, if you can understand where I am.
So,
I share a similar sentiment. I think the TDRs need to be, part and parcel of some of the build-out that's going forward in the downtown area. I just had a conversation with Ms. Blass about this before the meeting, and there were provisions back in 2003 that were supposed to be implemented and somehow were lost in the mix. And I would like to see that revisited. And I think I differ with Timmy a little bit, because if we're going to limit the size of the build-out on higher floors, I would be okay with the 100% build-out on the first floor.
so with respect to the TDRs, I think, quote, your internal team, your town staff agrees with you. And actually, those code amendments are already drafted. They've been drafted. The heavy lift was the secret analysis in order to do that, because downtown, we're talking, it's greater than 20 acres. So the thought was, and Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, when we sat down and prepared those code amendments, we thought it best to incorporate it into the update to the comprehensive master plan. And if you look at the schedule of tasks for the master plan, there's a whole page called out with respect to the TDRs and even the recommendations that were made by the TDR subcommittee.
One of the recommendations from the TDR committee was to require TDRs and allow residential development on Route 58. That's something that was never discussed with the board. That's being vetted, it's going to be vetted through the comprehensive plan process, so you have a real chance to digest whether or not that is something that you would want to see. But that's not for discussion today, but that is part of the comprehensive plan that you are going to be spending some time on this summer.
And the TOD code does have TDRs as a community benefit in it, so we're working on it. It's just, that is a big issue.
Right.
You know,
And-
Frank, I did have a conversation with Jeff and told him to make sure that it's comprehensively addressed. So he's fully aware, and I'm glad that you're bringing it up. It is so critical, and this is the perfect time to accomplish this. And we'll see what he comes up with.
So,
Jeff, to answer your question, I'll just say that I do agree with Councilman Hubbard. I don't think we should be going corner to corner. I do like them, you know, even the building, last apartment building that was built is like corner to corner. To me, it's a little too New York City for me, and I would like a more aesthetic approach to it. I like a little more green, and so I would agree with him that we're looking at more like 80%.
Okay.
so one of the things I just want to add is we have, quote, a park and rec fee component. And either the town board, because downtown's an urban renewal area, the town board will make a determination that there's an adequate set aside for park and recreation. So think about it. The set aside for 80 apartment units, that's pretty significant. That's going to impact development. Or in the alternative, it's going to be $3,000 per unit that they have to contribute. That $3,000 per unit is going to be, quote, incorporated into the town square, new sidewalks, new grassland areas, connecting a pathway from the town square to East End Arts, perhaps even reorganizing the East End Arts property to make it visually more green, potentially expanding Ammerman Park. You know, we own the properties down there, and the parking district owns properties down there. And we have the ability to, quote, create more green, not just proximate to these developments, but for the entire community to benefit from
And I
with the
think
$3,000.
I would just add, the practical reality of 100% build-out, when you say corner to corner, that's not reality. And I'll just give you a perfect example, is Munchnick, right?
Yep.
So that building is built in a particular location. It needs access, it needs fire access. So on the west side of that building, the site plan now has a practically 30-foot right-of-way there that will become a public amenity. And so even though that building is large and will cover the lion's share of the site, the sidewalk requirements, the airspace requirements for apartments, parking entrances and exits, curb cuts, crosswalks, all of those things are going to not ever allow anything to be corner to corner. And I fear, and I think perhaps if we want to discuss it further with Barry Long, it might be a good idea, because if you do the 80%, you may be unwittingly creating those gaps that Anne Marie was referring to earlier, and I think that could be a mistake. So before we make that decision, and maybe it would benefit the board to have Barry come into a work session and just sort of give you some examples of how and why he made the recommendation for 4 stories and 100% lot coverage.
Yeah, I would like to see that, and I'm not talking about the entire, this is a square, right? I believe, and I've spoken to police about this, right? And when you create alleyways, you're actually creating crime opportunities, right? And it's harder to police, so we understand that. It's really off the sidewalk. And in speaking with the people that developed the Gallo building, they said they regret going 100% out to the sidewalk on the east side and on the north side. And, that's, and I also know
Well, that was the reason that you guys decided to do the pattern
pattern
book in
book.
the first place, so
No, well,
that,
and
those
right.
exact things are what generated
Right.
these new design standards.
Right, and when I looked at a pattern book from Westbury, who's redeveloping their town, a big concern of theirs was to widen their sidewalks.
Absolutely.
Because they were going to bring more people when they developed the town, okay? So they wanted wider sidewalks, to your point. And I get it, but I think it'd be good to hear
But it
from
is in
Barry.
the,
Yes.
the wider sidewalks is in the code, and there's standard for, appropriate sidewalk width, so it includes amenity space, which is what the businesses would use to show their wares, there's, transition walking space, and then there's that space that's between the walkers and the curb, so it could be a bench or a planter or some decorative item there, and it's a particular width, and that's called out in the code, so I think you'll be happy to see that, but I do think.
I
if-
would
if-
like to see the visual of that, though.
Yeah.
How it plays out, and if Barry could, do that for
Absolutely.
us. I think that would make it
Having Barry come and
clearer.
illustrate that.
I
would-
think that would be a good idea, and the other thing, I need a clear answer on how we stopped at 4 stories, and we're not leveraging a 5th story.
That was the public engagement process that generated the 4 stories. And I don't think the public was interested at all in going a 5th story, TDRs or not.
Even
So
if it was set back, were they ever
Yeah,
shown?
that was,
even
that
the
was,
fourth story will be set back here under the current new, standard. So it's, I
and
think.
Dawn and I had originally drafted in the beginning of the pattern book process, not knowing what the public outcome would be, Dawn and I drafted, for lack of a better term, incentive zoning. So even if they wanted to limit the height, we could, quote, give, whether it's TDRs, park space, we were trying to build that in, but ultimately, during the pattern book process, the public spoke, and,
Yeah, and they were, I think,
yeah,
again, the one building that you were referring to either was the impetus for all of this, which is good, so it made the board do something that needed to be done and was helpful. But it was a strong.
The public was perfectly clear in the hearings.
I think,
Right.
yeah, and I think if,
I think they wanted to limit it even more.
well,
Yeah,
there were
some people
certain
did.
people who wanted to, and there were certain people, there was a
It
wide
wa-
variety.
it was a struck balance, is what.
Exactly.
what
right.
I'll just say, in fairness to that building, that was not the original design at all.
Correct.
It
Yes,
was
that is
not.
correct.
And the original design was beautiful, and
It
that
was.
got turned into a box.
Well, that's why the pattern book and the adoption of this code is so important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it really addresses all those impacts, and I'll just highlight, yesterday, myself, Dawn, Councilman Hubbard, and Councilman Kern, and Jeff, were in on a planning meeting. And if you recall, one of the projects was proposing an existing building to be taken down, new design. If you looked at what was being proposed, they were coming out onto the sidewalk and reducing the width of the sidewalk by 50%. This code shall not permit that. So it gives every developer the blueprint, not only the mass and design, and really the location, the footprint, but even how it will look. And so nothing is going to, because I understand from the Gallo project, it was very different from when it was first submitted to ultimately how it was designed and the materials that they used and the
Colors.
framing of windows and doors.
beautiful.
And the first floor Main Street facade, it was
Okay.
very different. Right.
Yeah, so one other question. In the comp plan, right now, and I know I'm new to the committee, so we've had, I think, one meeting, right? So, can we put a population cap in Riverhead? Do we have the right to do that?
According to
That's only
zone,
for
yes,
China.
Huh? Wait,
you can, but,
I'm
I don't
just,
think you could.
I mean,
don't
as
think
far
you
as
could-
people
Stop
moving.
people from moving to Riverhead?
Oh, I thought you meant in the zone.
no, I'm glad you're,
I
I'm
thought
glad
you
you're
meant in the
laughing
zone,
at it,
'cause we do
because
have a cap
then you're
for
making
DC1.
my point.
For residents.
I'm really
So,
glad
yeah,
you're laughing
that's what
at
I-
this, because you're making my
500,
point, right?
12.
That if the population grows, okay, what I'm ultimately concerned about, because people may complain about heights now, but when the farms are gone, they're not gonna be happy.
That's a fair point. So you're talking more about density restrictions than population
Right, that's a big difference.
reduction.
Well.
Well, I'm just,
yeah,
I get
but
your point, I was just
Where,
making.
where you gonna, eventually, where you gonna put it? That's, I
Well,
mean, I like to
that's-
look down the road, not,
And
I
that's why
know,
the comp plan will,
you know,
be helpful.
we don't have a problem in town hall right now. When
But
the population goes to 60,000, we might need a big.
And I
But
think
I'm not
that-
willing to
and-
give up the aesthetics of our downtown Riverhead to create,
And just to your,
create an
to your
urban city.
point, right,
It's not,
we used to just do building design. Now we're doing urban design, we're doing downtown design. We're designing not just the buildings, but the sidewalks, the open spaces, the parking. All of those things are now part of that design process that you're going to, move through, in particular downtown, because you're the agency that's gonna be doing the site plan review for these also. So
So why
much
don't we
better
live
than
it,
it was.
why don't we think about limiting downtown to 3 stories and the 4th story being via TDRs?
I think
That
because
way you're
the,
allowing your 4 stories, but we're also helping the farmers that we need to help. That needs to be addressed.
so we could do that, however, I think through the pattern book process, members of the business community and finance community stressed that in order to encourage the revitalization and renovation or new construction downtown, there had to be a certain rate of return. And they were arguing or advocating then that it really diminished the rate of return and would likely not spur investment into downtown.
They're always going to say that, though, Amber.
No, I
The
know,
bottom
I know,
line
I
is the
know.
That
dollar.
really is a tipping point there.
There is.
So I think it's important to remember that when you're building a building, you're gonna have all your infrastructure costs, you're gonna have your park and rec fees, you're gonna have,
Underground utilities now that we require. We're now having the developers do the map and plan for the water district
and the pile-up if there's
Yeah.
parking, and, so
and the rec
it,
fees.
I get that. I get that. And don't tell me that they're not still making money, because they are, or they wouldn't be here knocking on
well,
our
but if you
door.
think about it,
Not that I don't want the development. Now, listen to me. I'm not
I
saying
agree
don't
with you.
do
I
it
agree.
because we need it. But I think in terms of what we're discussing today, we have enough in the pipeline and already here that we don't have to continue to go with these 5-story or 4-story monsters. And they're all rentals. We're not helping our people, our young people in particular, to buy a house when they're paying rents that eats up all their money. We need to have more stuff that is sustainable for them to purchase and buy their own. They're gonna take care of it better than a rental unit. And it's worked in Patchogue with all the condos and townhouses that they did. That's what we need to be focusing on, not so much allowing more of the buildup downtown. What's in the pipeline's already over the 500 units that we
Yes.
talked about. Now, how are we going to address the 500 units? Where does that stop? Some point in time, and I know with the apartments, generally speaking, they're not providing a lot of kids into the school district. But some of them are going to, and we know they're at bursting at the seams. So when does this kind of stop in terms of the 500 unit? We have to collectively agree on an approximate number, not maybe a specific number, but when are we there? And how do we know when we're there?
and you have, so the TOD isn't in the DC1, so not subject to the 500 unit cap, so, and you're getting some.
And that's all market rate.
That's all market, rate. You're getting some
Yeah.
activity there,
Yeah.
so,
Thanks.
stuff to talk, very good stuff to talk about. I think comp plan is a good opportunity to discuss that too.
And
Yeah.
one thing, Tim, is that, right now, we're allowing 5 stories, 60 feet. That's permitted today. And what this does is we're cutting that back. So we are reducing and minimizing all those other impacts that you're referring to. So this does take that step.
And I think
Backwards, so to speak.
it might be worth thinking about because we talk about this all the time. We could talk every single piece of legislation until, from the day we draft it to the day we die. Maybe it's a good idea to think about adopting this and then working on making those changes that you want. Because just there's so many important things in here now that you don't want to
Lose those.
throw the
Well,
baby out.
and the important thing is we can always make the changes.
That's what I'm
I
saying.
agree with you on that.
That's what I'm saying. So
But it's
perhaps
something that we definitely have to discuss. And honestly, I would almost rather make the changes now when we put it all forward if we could, because to
I
me,
agree.
sometimes things get lost down the
But the
road.
500 unit cap is a much bigger discussion,
Yeah,
so
we're not gonna
putting
resolve
that
it
in
in the
here,
next
I
week.
think would delay it significantly.
The question
And
of the
it's-
80 versus 100, that we can address between now and next week. But the 500 unit, that's going to be a much longer, lengthier discussion.
When you talk about the 80% build-out, we develop our town square, we're going all the way down to the water, right to a boathouse, we're losing the parking area, so our parking is gonna be more developed behind Suffolk Theater, behind the church, and you need pedestrian access, but you can call them alleyways, but I think you need more landscape, pedestrian passages, so that to get to the end, I don't wanna come down to Main Street, walk around a whole block to come around to the back of the building, so I can get,
So,
Let's have Barry
it's-
talk about it, because I
Right.
think he'll give you a good understanding of both options, and then you can think about what you want to do.
I know a visual for me is so helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why it's in the code as a visual. It's very helpful to the developers too. And it was helpful for us to be able to show them, this is how it's gotta look. And we're getting really, I think, good response.
yeah.
I
think
really
Frank is
do.
absolutely right, it's hard to visualize a number.
So, I have to apologize to the town board, but dovetailing to this amendment, I think I overwhelmed Karen, and she neglected to put in the code amendment regarding the payment in lieu of parking provision. And obviously, if that were to move forward, the amendment to the parking schedule, and also the amendment to the dimensional table. I have copies for you for the payment in lieu of parking. If you want them today, I'll give it to you. If, whatever direction I'm apologizing, you didn't get it. I think Eric and I both thought, and even Jeff thought, Karen got them in, but it's just been hectic.
Why don't you give
Yeah.
it to us, please?
Just so you know, the parking the dimensional table is very simple. It basically strikes out all the existing code requirements for setbacks, height, that sort of thing, and then refers you to the law that you see before you. So that's the only change to that, but it has to be done legally, so, but that's all that does, that section.
Nimri, could we get,
Just give me
while
three
we're
up there.
discussing this stuff, an update on like an explanation for myself towards the
I'll
better
take one more.
understanding of the park and recreation
Oh,
fees
got it.
associated with the build-out down there and what actually, how it's determined and what they're paying.
Sure, so, because the town board has site plan approval for projects within an urban renewal area, it's actually, the onus is on the town board to actually make a determination whether or not, if the developer offers land for park as part of his project, it's the responsibility of the town board to determine if that's adequate, if the proposal of the developer is adequate. Typically downtown, I'll tell you, a developer is not going to offer land. Why? It's too valuable, and in order for him or her to get a rate of return, they're going to look to build whatever density permits. So instead, what the town board would then do is make a finding with respect to park and rec fees, which is $3,000 per unit. We have ample studies on the record already. Ray Coyne has a report that's really very complete. For the town board actually to utilize that report and substantiate the $3,000 per unit. I can rattle off my head right now, we need money for the town square. We probably need improvements to Ammerman Park, Grangeville Park, Stotsky Park. I know it, we probably all drive there and don't walk there, but actually, I think it's 0.8 of a mile. You could bike there, or you really could walk there. Stotsky Park, we have turf fields that we'd like to put in the back. Right now, it's dirt and at times completely unusable. We need to revamp the courts into all-purpose courts. We need to improve the walkway and pathway there.
I get that, I'm just trying to, how we're determining the actual fees and what they're paying,
It's,
Building number.
it's under the code.
It's 3,000 per unit.
Yeah, it's under the code.
When was that put into place?
That was put into place probably
Long.
10, 15 years ago, and before that,
So that big building along McDermott and everything, they paid into Park and Rec?
no. So,
Why?
probably because I'll say it this way. So at the time, Park and Rec fees traditionally, under New York State statute, were applied to subdivisions only. Then over time, they were applied to site plans. So while we captured it in our code, we didn't apply it. We're applying it now. We didn't apply it,
And that's,
but we're applying it now.
and it's gotta start happening, including the applications that are before us.
And that's
I've been
been-
advocating for this, and just recently, a review revealed that it has not been applied. And to me, it's almost like giving the developers a break.
So has this been made clear to the ones that are currently in the pipeline that they're all paying into Park and Rec?
Absolutely.
They're
Has
aware of
to.
that?
Absolutely. And
That
I'm
first
con-
project was, I mean, let's call it what it is, it was rushed through. And there was a reason, I guess, behind that, in terms of they wanted somebody to come in and break the ice downtown and start to invest, and I get that, but that's really what happened. It was pushed through too fast, and I don't know if a discussion was ever had or not had. It wasn't by me, it was a little prior to my coming on the board, but I'm sure there was a discussion about it, and it was bypassed for whatever reason.
So, to Tim's point, and I know we've been discussing in prior meetings, and even as, I think yesterday, right, about equity, which I think is really, really key for younger people. I would like to know, when Barry makes his presentation to us, what he knows about what is going on in other towns to achieve that goal. Okay, whether it's condos, I'd like to know how it's working. I know there's a
Agreed.
mechanism.
Oh, he's got a
wealth
great
of
grasp on it.
knowledge,
Well,
yeah.
because but that needs, to me, it needs to be in the comp plan, because you cannot, a lot of these people are strapped with college debt, there's no way you're gonna get a loan, so.
It's a crisis, and you're gonna, I think
Yeah.
we're on the agenda to discuss that just this morning also, so.
Good, okay, thanks.
And I just want to reiterate, I know in the last 2 years, this has come up at least twice at a town board work session or meeting, that these funds has to start, it must be collected. And I don't think anybody should sign off on it. We should have something in place, Anne Marie, to ensure that it doesn't, there's no oversight again.
I think also-
We've lost a lot of money because of us neglecting to enforce
So-
that.
And
But we're doing it,
Okay.
And
moving
one
forward.
frustrating thing about those fees that we charge to developers for recreation is that they can only be used for capital improvements. They cannot be used for maintenance. So this is an interesting thing for you to think about. We talked about this a lot with the trail, and we have so many maintenance problems with our parks. We have this fund, it'd be great to be able to use it, but are we ready to build a new park that we then don't have the funds in perpetuity to maintain? So that's always an interesting question.
We're already at that level.
So-
That's
we're
why I'm
already
saying,
there.
so
We
perhaps
can't-
the,
we
dis-
can't
and I don't
afford to
know what
maintain.
happened back in the day, but perhaps the discussion was,
And that's the problem, too.
We're
You
not
can't
gonna
use it for
build-
maintenance and operation costs, it has to be used for capital.
because if we
Correct.
could use it for maintenance, it'd make our lives so much easier. I know.
So I hope
know-
Councilman Bayrod doesn't mind. He and I have had this discussion, and we've already drafted a proposed amendment to state statute. It's just really he and I wanting to roll it out to the town board, seeing if everyone agrees, and then we would approach our state representatives. And so we would amend it, that state statute, because the statute is crystal clear, it's only for capital improvements, capital projects. Our goal was to amend it to allow us to use a percentage of the money for maintenance, even staffing. Why? Every time we add a park, or every time we do an improvement to the park, we not only have to maintain it, but we have to have the personnel to assist us to maintain it.
And
Sir,
it was sort of born out of some of the open space projects that we've had through the years, where the county says, okay, we'll buy the property in your town, which is really great, but then we're left with the intermunicipal agreement to make sure that it's
Sharper's
maintained.
Hill is a
Right.
good
Sharper's
example
Hill
of
is-
that,
So-
where it's
And, you know, so
Thanks,
we,
thanks.
you know,
Yeah.
that problem
Great.
never goes away. You're always paying for,
There's always a cost.
And it's a
Yeah.
new liability, it's a new everything, you know, so I think the maintenance costs, it would be great, because it is, we could just keep building new parks all over the place, but then they have to be taken care of, and we
So
like to do them
I'll
as well.
share that if it's, I know we
Yes.
hadn't planned on talking about that, but I'll share our proposed amendment to the
Please
state law and then look for guidance.
That's fine. So we're gonna add this to the, we'll add this resolution, correct?
So,
I'm gonna talk to Barry and
This is
see if
the
we can
pilot.
get him in to the
So
next
she
work
gave it.
session.
Pile up, yes.
We're gonna add this,
so I can add it in the
yes.
minute track queue?
Agree?
Can I also just, I didn't want to overburden you, so
Oh, yes, I do.
the dimensional table and the parking schedule. The dimensional table goes hand in hand with the 301 proposed amendment, and the parking schedule goes hand in hand with the pilot. So I'll put, permission to put those in?
We'll put them in. You okay with that?
Great.
Everyone? Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to say for the record, because, you know, we've got constituents like on Horton Avenue, they got a park there. They've got 2 parks. Nothing's been done there. And what they've said to me is, all we hear is Stotchke Park. Okay, that's all we hear. We're gonna fix this park and never their parks, you know, the parks that are over by Horton, so.
Okay, so I think
That's,
we're gonna
but
stay on.
Bob, that park was
on topic.
completely resurfaced and redone a couple of years ago with a scoreboard, so that's.
No, I know they have the scoreboard, but they're talking about, they just need some parking there.
All right,
Oh,
so-
parking,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
All right, so let's go back and stay on topic. So you're putting those 3 resolutions in?
Right.
Anything
Jeff, you
else?
want to hit the expert one?
Sure. So the next one is actually the easiest of the 3 that we're going to talk about today.
You want to give us copies?
Sure.
Right now, so oftentimes when you receive and review an application, a site plan application, and the planning board receives and reviews an application, there is need for an outside independent expert in a specific field. A lot of times, we will hire a traffic engineer with the planning board to review a traffic impact study of a site plan application. We'll oftentimes retain, for example, Jeff Seaman to help us out with the ecological, environmental, wetlands review of an application. Unless the town board or the planning board, whoever is lead agency, issues a positive declaration, we have to hire that person at the taxpayer's expense. What this law does is requires the applicant to pay for that expert. That's all it does. So it takes it off the taxpayer's burden of having to pay for it, and it allows the applicant, requires the applicant to pay
Long
for
time
it.
coming.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
And
How
you'll
time-
see, it goes really hand in hand with the pilot, because if we have to do a traffic study to see at what capacity we are regarding parking, Jefferson would have the ability to retain someone to do that analysis.
Which will also expedite, because he's so
right.
overwhelmed in there that I think that
Yeah, I like
it
that.
has a multiple positive benefits.
Who chooses who the engineer is gonna be?
We do.
We do.
We do.
And we have a list of them, or,
We have a list of, there are very few traffic engineers, so there's one that we
I
constantly go
understand
back
that,
to, and we have our list of wetland experts that we like to rely on.
Is this going to apply to fire department's review as well?
No, because we have our chief fire marshal who does our review for us.
And I understand that, but I'm just asking, like, so he's the final
He is the final
decision
person.
maker, no question about it.
Right.
But we've had discussions where you ask for insight from local fire districts, and they're laying out-of-pocket money to review these plans and so forth. So can other companies hire an independent person to review those plans and
They
save
are,
money for the fire
we rely
districts?
on, Anne Marie, they are a separate governmental entity. We cannot hire an expert on their behalf and charge an applicant for that.
Or give it an overtime for the fire marshal to review, which is
If it-
recently
if it
proposed.
was-
That's not what I'm proposing.
Okay.
I'm asking that, right now, fire districts lay out money to review plans that go before the board.
It's not necessary, from what I understand, it's not the process. if the building department and the fire marshal decides to take that extra step, which they have done it, look at the Munchnick building that we had to go to the state because it was at a standstill. We couldn't get a decision from our own planning division. So I think it's done as a courtesy.
But you're saying the
It's
district makes
necessary.
their own
Town code
expenditure?
requires fire districts to review.
I don't think it
large-scale
requires it.
planning.
We do
No,
that
it
as a
doesn't.
courtesy.
It's the fire marshal.
Fire
Okay,
marshal
even if
re-
we're doing it out of courtesy, and I understand Ken's point, if we're doing it out of courtesy, what is happening is, the fire district is coming out of their budget, all right?
So, yeah,
Go ahead.
no, go
It
ahead.
should not happen.
So Muchnick is put his building up, and Riverhead Fire Department encouraged large amounts of money to hire an engineer to review all those plans.
Yes.
But why
So
did
why
they
c-
do that? Because
Because
we could
town
have,
code says that they have to give their insight to it.
but that was, so I think really, and I understand your point, and I get that you don't want the fire districts making the outlay, but I think if the fire district needs specific engineering information, we could request that be done for them through our process, and the
Correct.
developer would
That's
pay that.
basically what I'm saying, is
Yeah,
if
yeah.
this was
would take care of
reworded
that,
so
yes,
that
if that's the issue, yes.
an
Yeah.
independent consultant or something can review plans to provide it so that they don't have to hire an
Yes.
outsource. They're laying
Yes.
out money, which is not right.
No.
Are they hiring people from the outside?
Yes,
Wow.
because how can, because you're a fire chief and you're an expert on firematic skills and so forth, doesn't mean you're an expert in planner and understanding the things, and so,
We
looking at
would
the different designs.
accept
and
a
so forth.
recommendation from our fire marshal as to that.
Yeah.
And if he deemed and recommended we retain an expert, we would. Why wouldn't we do it in any other instance? Because, quote, the fire marshal and everybody working in the fire marshal's office, they're employees of the town. And we're not gonna give away, quote, union work and outsource it. So if it's a situation wherein the fire marshal, as part of his review, deems it appropriate for engineering or some type of expert to assist his desire to have fire districts weigh in, we could do it in that situation.
So Anne Marie,
That's the best way I could
That's
say
the
it.
town code
the
asks
buck
them.
stops at the fire marshal, correct?
Correct.
It doesn't necessarily have to go outside unless, under unusual circumstances, the town can say, we need this expert opinion, we need a review from here, and the cost is left up to the applicant. But what it seems here, recently, that's tying everything up, it's going to the fire district.
Because our town code is saying that they have a right to weigh in, and so they feel the responsibility to weigh in.
But
They don't
the
come.
right, so I'll have to take a look at that language.
Yeah.
The right to weigh in and the requirement for fire marshal review are really separate and distinct. The right to weigh in, it's not a requirement that they weigh in. We do it in part because we acknowledge and recognize that we rely on all of our fire
you-
districts to respond to fire emergency events.
That's unfair because they're elected officials and they're elected to do due diligence. And that if they just said, we're not gonna weigh in on any of these things, that would be, then someone else could say, well, then you're not fulfilling
I
your.
That's why we're
due
not
diligence.
taking
I
that
think-
position,
Right, I
we're
think
trying to
it's
include them in the
regularly done.
process.
And I think there was a little bit of an issue with how they were reviewing and the time, and then the fire marshal's ultimate discretion. But I think this will help, because if the district is stumped on what to do and how to fix it, then they could say to the fire marshal, look, we really need to have somebody with firematic engineering experience look at this. And then the planning department could require the developer to pay for that.
There are certain applications, without a doubt, that would warrant retaining an expert. I mean, I could name one right now, and it had to do with a facility that was expanding propane, was it?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
You know, that was
like-
significant.
That cost the fire department a lot of money.
correct.
They had to
But
hire somebody.
this
to do
is
that.
why
we
this
can
will benefit,
fix that.
because in a project such as that, where there is the potential for serious risk, just by the use alone, never mind the volume of material being stored, this would absolutely be applicable.
So I have one question to this code,
We went in a
Jeff.
full circle,
No.
just for the record, where
Yeah.
initially you said it has nothing to do with it, that
No,
it is
but
applicable. so-
I have to be clear, we can't outsource or usurp the responsibility of our fire marshal's
Yeah,
office.
he's
That-
got the
that-
final
that I have to-
say.
There's no
He's
question
got the
about it.
final say,
Right.
and it's quite obvious that if you need an expert relating to fire, that you're gonna always use them.
If the fire marshal believes he needs an outside expert, he will retire, or retain that person. If the fire district independently retains their own,
It's not that he does. The fire marshal follows the state codes. The gentleman is staring at me from the back. He follows all the state guidelines and codes. However, sometimes a fire department, more profound with their current apparatus and their ability to do that, might be asking for other requests or consideration to be done that's maybe steps away from the code a little bit.
But I think,
And we will
I think
take
what
that
Ken's trying to
recommendation.
right, the fire marshal can
Just to
say,
make
this
the
is
fire
what we
district
need to
should
look
see
at, and we want an expert to help us evaluate our ability, the fire district's ability to respond to a fire event at the site, and whether this plan is good or not.
As
I
part
think
of the-
I think it does
Yeah,
serve your
as part of the
purpose.
planning process, we'll take the recommendation from our fire marshal. So if the fire district is in that situation and wants to make a recommendation, their first line of communication isn't with any of us, it's with the fire marshal's office. So we'll accept the recommendation from the fire marshal's office and implement it through this provision.
it's actually not, and respectfully, it's not a recommendation by the New York State Fire Code, it's a determination by the local fire
Marshal.
official.
And I think just practically speaking, and this is a legal answer, so you're gonna hit me if I'm wrong, but we wouldn't be able to cover the expense that the fire district incurred on their own accord to do that review if they hired an engineer just for them. That wouldn't be anything we could legally do.
Yeah,
So
they
what
should
happens if the
further-
fire department deems that they want further investigation done? They want another report, or a report done. Fire marshal says it's not needed, but they feel that it is.
If-
So can they request that and have it done on our dime instead of their dime?
That's where it's transparency during the process wherein it would be brought to light to you through probably Jefferson or Greg, whoever was reviewing, that there's a difference of opinion between the fire district and fire marshal. And you, as having the ultimate authority, are going to determine and direct accordingly.
I'll give you another scenario. So now, what happens if the particular project that you spoke about earlier, if the permits were not issued? So we shouldn't be making a trend that the fire districts are outlaying money and you're paying for a project that doesn't even exist. So it should be right in the very beginning stages. If somebody's making a proposal, they should be willing to pay an independent consultant, and it should be part of their initial filing of all their planning forms.
It's
so
in
that
there.
Well,
That's what,
That's
yeah,
what they can do.
I agree, and that's what.
So,
And that
for
prevents
instance,
them
yesterday at the pre-submission meeting, we make general comments about fire, firematic issues, right? Understanding the code and the experiences that we've had with the fire marshal's office. So, but the developer understands from that moment that the fire marshals are going to have, significant input on what, and we just basically say, these are the areas you can expect to have them weigh in on. If in fact, Craig goes to the fire district with the plan, and the fire district says, well, we don't understand this well enough, we need an engineer, then Craig would recommend to the planning department that we would like to hire an expert to do this particular review for this reason, and then the board could allow that.
And that would be under,
Correct,
provided
yeah,
under this.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly,
So I
okay.
don't think,
So-
I don't think that anybody would be left.
I,
And if the fire district ultimately felt that the engineer's decision was inappropriate, be up to you at the end of the day to approve or disapprove the site plan with whatever, whatever amendments you decide are necessary. So you could theoretically side with the fire district and their analysis of a matter versus our own.
One quick question on this code, Jeff, this goes to you. Let's say an outside engineer is needed, not in a fire situation, but on a project. Do they have to use, if I'm a developer and you say to me, you gotta use my guy, and your guy says it's gonna be 2 months, and I say, wait a minute, my guy can do it in a month. Does it matter who does it?
Yeah,
We decide.
we can decide, but if we could work with them to find someone to expedite, I think we probably could agree on an engineering firm
Right,
that would do it.
it makes sense.
So it's more
It's town to-
self-certification, than it is.
It's
I
the
have yet
town
to see a
decision.
traffic report.
I'm not talking about traffic, because I understand, that's a good one. There's only a couple of people that do it. I'm not talking about traffic, at all.
Okay.
We have people that are on retainer, for example, we use Just Eman religiously, and we get him on board, he does his review.
That's environmental, I get it.
Right.
Okay.
But just the engineering piece of it too, if we, or, any of that.
We have Vinnie Gaudiello that does a review all the time for us on larger scale projects.
Or Nelson Popenborough
Or Nelson
Unis, or
Popenborough.
H2M,
H2M, yeah.
or
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Haydock, or
Yep.
any engineering.
So it's not gonna
company.
hold anybody up, is
No,
where I'm going.
I mean, we've got very large applications before the planning board right now, very large industrial. We're having
Thank you.
H2M review it on behalf of the water district,
Okay.
and the applicant's gonna pay
Okay.
for that.
It should
Maybe an independent
speed up the
consultant that
process.
would have said selling gas for 50 cents less a gallon in one place will cause a traffic tie-up. Would have been helpful.
Was that, yeah, that's a good question.
But if you could have made that prediction, you wouldn't be working here.
Yeah, nobody predicted
That's true.
that.
Okay, so we're gonna move on. Thank you. I think Eric and Dawn, you're gonna stay behind. Your
We have
part.
one more.
I'm just gonna.
Yep, it's on the agenda, yeah.
Okay.
Small lot ordinance.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so,
This is, you're gonna like this one, I promise you. We talked about.
is Leroy Barnes watching? He's been wanting
sure
to
he
have
is.
this
I'm sure he is.
adopted.
Who is?
Leroy
Oh.
Barnes, for years, he's
Yeah.
been wanting to have this adopted.
I tried it once before, a few years ago when I was first hired. I got no legs, so we hoping this time, second time's the charm. This is something that's.
Also, Jeff, you might also want to mention that this request, and this resolution that hopefully is going to go through, it's standard across every town. Everybody has a small lot, this kind of
I
legislation.
can't speak for every town. I know that a certain other town that I was
Just about.
employed in elsewhere does have it, and it works very well.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the ZBA's been asking this, as you correctly stated, forever, and it's long overdue. This has to do with, we have a lot of pre-existing small lots that predate zoning, and the zoning does not match up with what the prevailing lot size is. The area is called the Number Street, west of Wildwood State Park and Wading River is a huge example. We get so many applications to the zoning board
Yeah.
in that neighborhood.
South Jamesport.
South Jamesport, further lane, just off of Hubbard Lane. Those areas, those lots were created prior to zoning. You have lots that are like a quarter acre in size, and they're zoned for 2 acres. And the law requires that they follow the 2 acre zone setback, side yard and rear yard. Anytime they want to do anything on their property, anything, putting a deck on it, it requires they go to the zoning board. If we adopt this law, it's estimated that the number of applications going to the zoning board will be cut in half. So this also, we talk about first-time ownership and ownership for young families to stay in the town, to build in the town. This will allow for smaller houses to be built, which are therefore be a lower price housing unit that's consistent with the community character. So it achieves so many benefits.
And I can just give you like an actual practical example. Last week, the zoning board's agenda had 4 matters that would have been eliminated by this. And just one example, there's a woman on one of the number streets who has a concrete porch with an aluminum roof. Existing concrete porch, the house was probably built in 1950. Because the zoning there actually eliminates any building envelope, actually. And in some cases, you wind up with like a 5-foot building envelope, so that's, so the zoning board is going to grant relief to those people. This takes care of that, and it handles the development by lot size proportion, and it works
Right.
very well. But this poor woman, it's a very tiny little house, 3 kids, she's on the Zoom. She probably paid a surveyor to have to survey. She had to pay an application fee, which is $500.
Yes.
And the advertising, and it probably took her a total of 2 to 3 months of delay to be able to enclose that existing roofed-over porch. And so this is the kind of stuff that we see all the time at the zoning board. garages, little small garages, you know, these things where, and it's really impacts people who are not building the garage, you know, the mansions. It's the people that are, you know, just trying to like bump out their house a little bit or put a pool in or something like that, and it really is effective in other towns, and the zoning board has been asking for it for a while.
Oh, it also makes a lot of people go out and do it without bothering to get any permits or going to
Correct.
the
And
zoning
that's true
board, so
too,
it's a
it's
two-pronged.
already hard enough to do
Yeah.
that, right?
So as Don points out, this is based upon, you're basing the setbacks based upon your lot dimensions. They call it the 3/10, 4/10 rule. So you base it upon 30% or 40% of what your lot width is, for example, or your rear yard depth is. So it's proportionality based upon your lot size. So you're not going to be, your neighbors are not going to be overwhelmed by having a big McMansion next door to you, so.
And if it gets bigger than that proportion, then they would come to the zoning board, and
Right.
then there would be an independent review there.
Right. So we'd like your permission to schedule that for a public hearing.
Yes.
Aye.
Okay.
And
Great.
that's all we have.
That's it? All right. Eric
Didn't
and
hear
Dawn,
anything about site plan fees on your list there,
Eric and Dawn,
Oh,
we're
the
gonna,
site plan fees was what we
I
just
just
talked
have
about
to
with the
get
independent consultant.
something out of my office.
just the,
Yeah.
okay.
That was it.
Not changing the overall fee
Okay.
schedule?
all right. Eric and Dawn, you're gonna stay behind?
Emery's gonna sit in on it.
So next discussion surrounds matters regarding the Community Housing Fund, also known as the CPF monies. And we're gonna wait for Dawn. She'll take the lead on this.
She ran away.
She ran away,
Yeah. Dawn. So this is-
Maybe take a commercial break.
Well, we,
This segment
Dawn,
has been
can
brought to
you
you
introduce
by-
the topic today? This is very current, and all towns are experiencing these
Yes.
type of discussions, and we need to get to a resolution as to how we're going forward. I believe we need to bring this before the people to vote.
Yes.
Possibly a public hearing, so just introduce the topic if you don't mind. Thank you.
So, in late 2021, Assemblyman Thiel introduced, and Governor Hochul ultimately, it was approved and signed, an increase in the CPF tax of 0.5%, so an additional 0.5% that will be allowed to be accumulated in a fund for affordable housing. And I left my notes on my desk, but I'm going to try to go without the notes. So, as you know, our CPF experience here in Riverhead is very different from certainly the South Fork and even Southold. And it gets increasingly different in Southold because there's so many very expensive houses. However, we had a very good year, I think, this year and last year. So the objective of this, and really more pushed by the South Fork towns than Riverhead, was to create a fund that could be used to develop affordable housing within the towns. And as you can imagine, you know, Southampton and East Hampton really do need that because they don't have it at all. However, Riverhead is a different town, as we know, and Riverhead has been incredibly responsible over the years in developing affordable housing of every size, shape, and type, including, we have a large stock of, you know, relatively affordable, even single-family houses. And based on the report from AKRF, we have 2,300 units of affordable housing in the town, and we're good until, I think, 2035. So our gap in Riverhead isn't rental housing, which it is in other towns. Our gap is really the equity position for residents of Riverhead. So a kid who graduates college, I think Bob mentioned earlier, has some student loan debt, renting an apartment, where do they go from there? Do they go to a house? Well, you're gonna go from, you know, from an apartment, maybe it's an affordable apartment, to a $500,000, you know, median priced house in Riverhead. You know, there are other opportunities in Riverhead that don't exist in other towns for something less, but it's still a tight market. So I think one of the things that we're looking at, and I'll just get back to this fund. So the state legislation allows the towns, pursuant to ballot proposition, to create a fund. and the fund would be used for affordable housing pursuant to a plan that you adopt. And so I was hesitant to really like get excited about this because I was worried that they were going to, allow you to use it for rentals, and as we know, we already have enough rentals, but we talked it through for months and months, and I think they all agreed, and it's going to be allowed in your plan if you want to use it for equity opportunities rather than rental housing. But the fund could wind up being substantial, and so what we'll be looking to do over the next few months, and we have to do two things. We have to adopt a local law creating the fund, and then a local law allowing the increase in the CPF tax by that 0.5%. And that bothered me a little bit because when the tax goes up, the home buyer has to pay more tax. But what they did to offset that was increase the exemption amount. So they're going from 150, and I don't have
To
it.
I think it's
200.
200, yeah. So so they'll be more exempt, and it evens out the tax. And I have like a little, and I'll share this with you, but it's basically a tax comparison. And this is a $900,000 house, which, isn't the typical Riverhead house. But in the $100,000 house with a 2% tax, the current exemption would be, and this is Southampton, but it's the same illustration. It shows $250 exemption, taxable amount of $650. The current tax would have been $13,000. With the 2% plus the 0.5% and the exemption increase, it reduces the actual overall tax by $500. So that's the intended effect of it, to either keep it even or reduce the overall tax that the person pays on the transfer. And so one of the things we are going to do, if you're inclined to do it, is we would need to adopt those local laws to get the ballot proposition done, and then we need to create a plan. And that, I think, you ought to do with public engagement, because the plan would really dictate how that money is spent. And one of the suggestions that our office is making is we have a couple of different ideas. The downtown area in the 2nd and 3rd Street area has a lot of blighted homes, vacant, dilapidated, and we are thinking we could use that money to work with a developer to acquire the property and build affordable equity, ownership condos, townhouses. And also I had a meeting with Habitat for Humanity last week, and it was a real eye-opener for me, and I'll share some of the stats with you. But I think what they do is they work with families, and the families are, working families. They have decent credit, and they have to put in a year of sweat equity into that house. So they actually work on the house that they build. And so if we can acquire land, Habitat can work with a family to actually build a house, and that family then has a house that's affordable for them. But I think he gave me stats that somewhere upwards of 60% of kids who grow up in an owned home rather than a rented home go to college. And so it's pretty impressive, and I think that might be where you want to focus on. But go ahead.
So I just want to take the board back. You are not required to proceed
Yes.
with this amendment and increase the 2% tax to 2.5%. It's only if the first step would be to adopt a local law establishing a fund. The second step would be a local law to create an advisory board. It's a requirement under the law, an advisory board. That advisory board would put forth the recommendations for the Community Housing Fund Plan. If you do all that, then you would go to mandatory referendum.
After you adopt the plan.
But we
Right.
have to have,
Okay, so
sorry.
you have to do all those prerequisites first. But the first decision that you really have to make is, what this law states is, if a town board desires to proceed in this fashion, and it passes by mandatory referendum, CPF would change from 2% to 2.5%, with that 5% going to fund this plan. But what it also does is it changes the exemption in Riverhead from 150,000 to 200. Why do I highlight that for you? if you do some research on Long Island housing data profiles, and you do a compare and contrast, what we now know with CPF and what the housing statistics state, I'm just going to throw this out there. You got to take a hard look. You could be losing CPF money by raising the exemption to 200,000 versus 150. Why? We have a predominant amount of affordable houses in the town of Riverhead. We have mobile homes, all that, quote, transfers, you have to take that into consideration.
2,300 units, right, AKR?
That's how many affordables we have now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you,
but that includes rentals also,
so,
apartments.
I mean, that's your first step is, as a town board, to analyze that and determine if you want to go forward. I mean, I don't know, and I don't want to put Bill on the spot, if he has any, additional statistics regarding CPF, but I can tell you, in recent reports, and it was in the press, how because of the mass exodus from the cities into the towns, particularly on the East End, CPF revenues were up. The reality for the town of Riverhead, those quote numbers that were given and reported, our share of that is 5%. The lion's share is in the towns who have the $1 million homes. We don't have that. So you really have to think about that first. But then if you want to move forward, you have to move forward on that project line that I described.
And I think it would be good if we could do a potential calculation using the most recent year's numbers and then some past years which weren't so good, because that'll happen again. And
Right.
this goes on for till 2030. And then the other thing, 2050 rather, right?
So my only concern is that the CPF is traditionally used for preservation efforts, and that's what it was really meant for. And to, sort of attach this to the CPF, it just seems like it's getting away from the actual intent, the original intent of it.
That's a good point.
It would be, in effect, this totally separate taxing fund.
Yeah.
It's just, you're just tying it to the CPF for, I guess, verbiage reasons, or because that's already a tax that's specific to the 5 East End towns.
Dawn,
We would have to have the ballot proposition to the Board of Elections by August 8th, but the plan can be separate, but we should have the plan kind of, if you decide to go forward, we should have the plan underway before that. But it is a little bit of a tight timeline.
So any of the purchase development rights going forward would use the monies from the CPF. That's always the way it was. And I understand that would be a separate and distinct 0.5% that would be utilized for something else, but I just wouldn't want it to compromise the
It
original
could.
intent.
Well, you're absolutely right. Throughout the years, it was preservation of open space, farmland, community, then it extended to water quality
Yes.
projects, and now it's to development of affordable housing. So we went from preservation
Yeah.
to development.
And there's
My
no
only
flush
concern.
on the South Fork. That's really why they were looking for things to
Right.
spend it on. Meanwhile, we're looking for money to spend it on, things we need to spend it on. So that is a very important
Right.
consideration.
all right, so I think, Anne Marie, can we get some stats on that? It seems like you have some.
Yeah.
And pass it to the board, and then we're
Yeah.
gonna make a decision if we're gonna go forward
Yeah.
with it. If we're not, there's no need to go,
Right.
I think the stats, what you presented here.
Right.
And maybe send a copy to the board on the local law. We have to be mindful that this is a local law, so we have to act on it. We can't just sit on it, and I know all the other towns have to act on it, and I think they're looking
Well,
towards that.
Well, you don't have to
It's-
act.
We don't, it's not
Yeah, we can choose not
required
to go forward, that's an
Right.
action.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you can go forward with it at any point thereafter. It's just, I think the push was for the ballot this year, for this election cycle, if you want to have the mandatory referendum on this November. There's nothing saying that we couldn't have it on for the following.
Following year.
The following year.
That's
What's the
a good point.
deadline for this?
There is no.
Well, the
No, for us,
August
don't
8th
you have
for
to-
this year.
Oh.
To be
The
on the
August
ballot.
8th ballot proposition
August
deadline is for, if we want to do it this year, but I think that's a good point that, maybe wait out and see. But I would like to see the numbers, how it would
Yeah.
potentially
I would
project
also.
out based on our total
Definitely.
intake.
But once you're in it, and it sunsets in 2050. So once you're in it to 2050? Is that,
Yeah,
did I
yeah.
understand that?
I don't know if we could opt.
Well, I think the way the law is written, and that's a really good question, I think the way it's written is whether you, quote, for lack of a better word, using the marijuana term, opt in, whether you opt in or opt out, it's going to be a ballot proposition.
The other,
So if you adopted it, then wanted to repeal it,
the other use we could do with it too is first-time home buyer,
I like
down
that.
Yeah,
payment
that's what I was gonna
assistance.
ask you about.
So
Yeah,
we
I
could
like
do
that.
we could do run through our office or Long Island Housing Partnership, down payment assistance, which could be either a grant or a low-interest loan. And that would be, they'd have to remain in the house for a period of time, and it could be clawed back if they don't do that. So that's another option as well.
And it's
Other
great.
towns already have that, correct?
So Suffolk County has a program, and we participate in it, and actually, I think the supervisor's office just did a little blurb on the web site yesterday, that the county has additional, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm mixing it up with rental
Yeah,
assistance, I'm sorry,
that's
yeah.
additional fund
So,
for
but the
COVID.
county has had first-time home buyer down payment assistance for a long time. I don't know if they had it in 2020, but I'm anticipating they're gonna pick that back up again, and maybe you could piggyback those two programs and really make a dent in a, because that's the
And
difficult
in
part,
essence-
it's hard to save the money, even for a small down payment,
In essence, it'll take somebody who's a renter and they can move on to the next step
Exactly.
and possibly own a condo or a small starter house, and it gives them that extra push, so you're going from rental to going into a
And
home.
I think you can target certain areas in town that you think would be benefited by those types of investments.
I can tell you that I myself am a product of a Sunny May first-time home buyer's loan. That's how I built my house in Wading River, and we did have a contractor with this, we couldn't sell the house, and there would be,
Yeah.
if we did, we'd have to return certain money, but we knew we were here to stay. But renting an apartment and trying to,
Save the money, yeah.
to put money aside to save for down payment is a very difficult thing, and especially, and I imagine it's harder today as the apartment rentals have even gone up and the cost of houses has gone up.
Yeah.
So the gap just keeps widening every year. But I would not be in my home if it wasn't for that program, so.
You and me both?
Yep.
Same thing.
Okay. So,
I think that's a great approach. So
I
let's
guess
look
we'll
at the
get you the
stats
stats and then,
and
Yeah.
we'll see where we're going.
More
But I love the
analysis
second
of
approach.
What the legislation calls for.
yeah,
Okay,
great.
great, thank you, everyone. Moving forward, our last discussion concerns matters surrounding Chapter 255 event, Track Not Street. Unfortunately, late last night, there was some new developments as to the use of the runway, and since we have voted on this, there is legislation, there is approval of the last plans. It was added on early this morning to the calendar, and Marie, Anne Marie, you're today, huh?
So, just really quickly, in the past, our former town attorney, Bob Kozakevich, handled the events last year. So Eric and I kind of inherited those, and for so the application for
Race
not
Track, not street.
street,
All
was
three, this
Right.
spring, summer, and fall classes.
So when it was, quote, introduced and rolled out to the town board back in November, the proposal was to use the
Taxiway.
taxiway of the 10,000-foot runway, together with like a portion of the 10,000-foot runway. Last year, it was held on the 7,000-foot runway. Well, so the reality of it is, the runway is approximately, the taxiway is approximately 220 feet wide. We have an easement over 187 of the feet. We own approximately 35 feet. So in fairness to the applicant at the time of his application and discussion before the town board, and even up until the resolution that was presented to the town board, that wasn't made clear. Discussions were had between Bob and the applicant regarding permissions required for maybe fee title holders of that portion of the taxiway that the town simply had an easement over. But probably admittedly, perhaps could have been made more clear and more direct and succinct. And after the fact, the town attorney, Dawn, and myself actually had conversations about it, and then conversations with Mr. Scalzo, the event organizer. So, just want to make a long story short, because I can be long-winded. So, the event is going to be relocated onto the 7,000-foot runway. It's going to be organized and designed as it was last year. Due to the late timing of all these changes, I'll inform the board that the scheduled events for this coming weekend will not take place. The applicant, Mr. Scalzo, is not requesting additional dates. It's simply not going to take place this weekend, but the other events will go on. An amended resolution is going to be put to the town board late, because we want to correct it, get it on the record, and I think,
Amend the agreement.
right.
Okay, so all you're doing is changing the runway, you're going to,
It's just gonna-
we'll have the same plans as,
Yeah.
and that was all approved anyway, the EC was fine, everything's going to stay in
Correct.
place. Mr. Scalzo, is that the case, what she's reiterating to us? Yeah, yes, please. How you doing?
Peter
Good morning.
Scalzo. Hi. Yes, that's correct. And again, the idea of moving over to that 10,000-foot runway area was my idea because there was a lot of benefits going over there. However, learning now with the situation with properties that Illuminati might own, or the easement that you have or don't have, or the 35, it seems to be, it makes a lot more sense to move over back where we were. We've got a proven track record as far as everything that we did there last year. There is one major change, which, and I know that the fire marshal is here. I will give him the new site plan, and I'll also discuss it with the chief of police. And what the big improvement is coming up with this new site plan is that our pit area is going to be using the runway, which is, if any of you folks came out to visit us last year, the tremendous success we had. The only thing that was a negative in my mind was our pit area was too narrow, because we used the taxiway over at the 7,000 foot. However, now our plans are for the runway. It's twice as wide as what we had last year, and it's going to be perfect. The other issue that I had, the original thought that I had, why would we want to go over to the 10,000 foot, is, as you folks know, you have this standing agreement with the IAA. But from what my understanding is, if something can be worked out, that the IAA, in case, God forbid, we have another emergency, that they will be able to put their cars over on the 10,000-foot runway, if that should come about, then that would be great, because that was another factor that I thought, why I would want to go on the 10,000-foot, not to be interrupted by IAA. But if that could work out, that's wonderful.
And that's fine. I think you should also consider, Anne Marie and Pete, that you do have some rain dates that you might want to use those two, if they're not used.
Yes, what we're
So
going to
that-
do also, as far as our reputation, I've mentioned it to you folks many, many times. I've been around forever. My reputation is stellar. What we're letting everybody know is, again, the reason for the cancellation for this weekend, for these two dates, is as much as my guys are or animals, as far as the way they work, it would be impossible to be able to do everything, make sure that the DEC would be happy, also make sure that the fire marshal would be happy, and the chief of police. So, yes, we are canceling this weekend. However, as we've always said to everybody, those events, now, we have 19 more events set up, 3 more for the spring series, plus we have another 16 more for what you approved, which is the summer and the fall series. So those tickets will be honored at any of those events. However, one other thing which I'm putting out publicly is we do have people that bought the whole series. So we can't make up any more rain dates because I wish we could here for the spring series, but as you know, we're in the bird nesting season. April 16th is our last event. Anybody that has bought tickets throughout the whole series will get a refund because
Perfect.
we can't give them more than what we promised.
Perfect.
Just to explain though, you have a maximum number of attendants.
Correct.
So if all the events were sold out, how are you applying tickets for these canceled events? You can't exceed your maximum number of attendants, so how are you addressing that?
Okay.
He's given the refund.
Well, no, he's saying, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're just saying that you're not refunding. If I just bought tickets just for this weekend, I'm not getting a refund, I'm being told I can go to any other day.
Correct.
Okay, but if you reach maximum attendance on those other days, we can't just go over and utilize the same thing, so how are we refunding those tickets?
He's not going over.
That's
He's
what
not going over.
We won't be going over. And another thing that you folks have agreed to, which I'm thrilled at, is you have doubled my allowable capacity from last year. So I hope that's an issue. Hope that we get to that
So
point, but
all we
that's
know,
the
too,
answer
and
to
I
that.
hope you have a sellout on all of it.
Yes, sir,
But I'm
I-
just saying, if it comes to that,
Yes,
somebody will have a right.
absolutely, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you don't hold an event, and thank you, I know it was addressed before about
Okay.
refunds.
Okay.
And that's critical, because
Yes.
the last race did not offer refunds at all.
Yes, right, that we will
And there
do.
were issues and concern, and the public, the people who bought tickets are pretty upset. And if we allow and permit a certain function like this event, then, we should discuss a refund policy as legislators, to ensure that people are not gonna get ripped off, so.
No,
Thank
no.
you for doing that.
Yes,
And I just want to thank the supervisor and alert the town board. She's authorized me, actually directed me to have an environmental monitor out there. So, Mr. Scalzo, you can anticipate that. I informed you of that.
Yes.
And we'll make sure that our grasslands are protected, preserved.
And thank you for bringing that point up, because that's important, and they did a good job last year.
Right.
They gave us a small, quick report. We did do a visual inspection. DEC also did a
Right.
visual inspection, and that's important, and that's gonna be a cost to the town. I mean, it's not a substantial
And-
amount of money,
and-
but it's very important that we have that.
and when we speak about cost, I hope everybody realizes, and again, I'm a big boy, it's my responsibility. My cost to be moving everything that we are moving is outrageous, tremendous. Also, the fact of losing the income from these two events that we had to cancel. But as we say, it is what it is. I'll always do the right thing, and that's where we stand. And again, the DEC have to make sure they're going to be happy. The fire marshal have to be sure he's going to be happy. To try to rush everything to do it for this weekend would have been impossible.
All right, great.
Thank
So we agreed to amend the resolution?
But just, in terms of just caution, I don't think we can change our current agreement that if we do have a hurricane and they do need to store cars, we're collecting money from them every year, so I think we have to understand that it could very well impact your event.
I think they also indicated, that they're not gonna renew the agreement with us. So that's in the works.
Is
The
it
attorneys-
expired,
Well,
or is it good this year?
They notified us they
I'm
might.
going to ask you this. If that situation arises, rely on counsel. We'll handle it, we'll deal with it. I promise.
And they also did indicate, I think it was through an email, that it looks like they're not gonna possibly renew in the future.
I just
think
don't want to
the
make
cars-
promises to Mr. Scalzo that we can't abide to,
Yeah,
that's
well,
all.
he's aware of, he
I,
was able to work with them last year.
I think I've proven over and over again, I'm very flexible, whatever it takes. We are so thrilled to be for you allowing drag racing to return. Whatever it takes, we will abide by.
Right.
Didn't you also say they could use the 10,000 square foot runway if they needed to?
We own it.
Yeah.
Right, so, okay, so we're good if we get a hurricane
And usually,
or
I think,
aliens come.
how long did it take between the
Bob, we'll
hurricane?
use your driveway.
And you could fill a lot of cars in
I
there.
know.
I think it took like 6 months from the time the hurricane occurred to us getting deliveries of the car,
Correct.
because they have to go through a whole process, they have to get recovered, and then they have to go get stored. So it would take about that time, 6 months for us to see the first car coming in under that agreement.
Yes.
So I think you guys are covered, and it's great. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, and you have a good day.
Thank you, you as well. Thank you.
Okay, that's it? Everyone? All right, in a moment, I'm gonna ask for a first and a second to enter into executive session to discuss the following.
With resolution.
Oh, we didn't do the resolutions yet. Oh, you're right. I think Joanne's gonna read the resolutions.
Yeah, he's doing that.
Good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
Start with resolution number 1. Authorizes the supervisor to execute a license agreement with Celtic Quest, Inc.
I just want to mention that there was some discussion apparently at a Jamesport Civic regarding the people parking for this Celtic Quest down at the town beach in Jamesport were then using their parking pass to go over to the town beach and use the town beach facilities. That is not true, that is not possible. The paperwork that they're given to park to use the Celtic Quest is just for that in and of itself. It doesn't allow them to go over to the town beach and use those facilities. So I just wanted to clarify that for the public.
Thanks, Jeff.
Number
Okay.
2, authorizes the supervisor to execute an agreement with Netflix Productions, LLC, for use of Town of Riverhead premises and for police department personnel and vehicles regarding a film project. Number 3, authorize purchase of a 2022 or newer Vector truck by the Town of Riverhead Highway Department. Number 4, reclassifies a principal office assistant in the engineering department. Number 5, authorizes Lawrence M. Levy, DBA doing business as On-Site Productions, Nunc Pro Tunc, to provide additional audio-visual production services for the Town of Riverhead, DRI, public meetings, March 21st, 2022. Number 6, sets fees for the spring/summer brochure. Number 7, authorizes the supervisor to execute a stipulation with the CSEA Local 1000, AFSCME, AFL-CIO, the Riverhead Town Police Benevolent Association, and the Riverhead Town Police Superior Officers Benevolent Association. Number 8, reassigns the salary of an account clerk. Number 9, ratifies and approves the interdepartmental transfer of an employee. Number 10, accepts the retirement of the town personnel officer. Number 11, authorizes the removal of fixed assets. Number 12, attendance of one police department employee to the traffic safety conference. And number 13, grants excavation/exportation permit as provided by Chapter 229 to Riverhead Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep Ram. Number 14, authorizes town clerk to publish and post public notice to consider a local law to amend Chapter 251 of the Riverhead Town Code entitled, quote, noise, public nuisances, and property maintenance, end quote. Number 15, approves special event Chapter 255 application for Riverhead Country Fair.
Yes.
Number 16, assumes lead agency status, issues negative declaration pursuant to SECRA for the site plan application of 38 Main Street, 38 Main Street, Riverhead, New York. SCTM number 600-129-4-10.1. Number 17, awards bid for printing of recreation brochure. And number 18, ratifies acceptance of donation. Number 19, authorizes Lawrence M. Levy, doing business as On-Site Productions, to provide additional audio-visual production services regarding the Board of Assessment review hearing on May 17, 2022. Number 20, Round 17, Downtown Revitalization Grant Project number 62204, for the installation of LED lighting, LED lighting. Number 21, authorizes the supervisor to execute an agreement, non-pro-tunc, with Long Island Telecommunications and Electronic Services, Inc. Number 22, accepts Highway Superintendent's personnel report and request for Town Board resolution to effectuate personnel request. Number 23, accepts Highway Superintendent's personnel report and request for Town Board resolution to effectuate personnel request. Number 24, accepts Highway Superintendent's personnel report and request for Town Board resolution to effectuate personnel request. And last, number 25, adopt Town of Riverhead Local Solid Waste Management Plan Update.
That's it? Any
That's it.
questions on this?
Thank you, Joanne.
Great, thank you,
Well
Joanne.
done.
Okay,
First time.
No problem, Frank.
yes, it was. Good. Okay, so in a moment, I am going to ask you to go for a first and a second to enter into executive session to discuss the following matters surrounding the change to demolition contract for the town square, and that'll be with Thomas, Testa, and Dillingham. Can I have a first and a second to close this work session?
So moved. Second.
Good. Thank you, everyone. This work session is closed. Please be safe and have a good day.